cases where, a guy commits murder. He's driving around on his motorcycle with his wife's severed head to move the body, and he's caught, right, with the severed head.
What?
All sorts of. I think a lot. A lot of them are through our criminal defense. You have all sorts of really interesting cases of people who have committed either a murder. You get exposure to those facts. I think one of the ones, there was a case I actually had to recuse myself, and it was one of our neighbors in Richmond Hill. She was killed by she married woman who was killed by her lover, who was a police officer. So the police officer was charged with her murder. She had gone missing for, I think, almost for a year, and they found her, and he finally turned her. He was going through a marital separation, so the wife wanted to sell the family home, and they found her body it was in a garbage container, sealed and hid behind a wall. So he was one of the clients that we dealt with, but we've dealt with all sorts of different murders. And they're all. If you're a fan of any type of docudrama like Forensic Files, yes, or then all of those circumstances, they do happen. They're there. We've had cases where a guy commits murder. He's driving around on his motorcycle with his wife's severed head to move the body, and he's caught, right, with the severed head.
What?
All sorts of cases. So any legal, most,
Holy cow.
A lot of people who are in custody on a murder charge, they can't afford because they're in custody. It's not like they're working, right?
Yeah.
So in many circumstances, Legal Aid Ontario will provide a full defense for that person. But yeah, it's interesting work because, again, you get exposure to all of these case scenarios, and you think, oh, this is crazy. It's when you think about fact and fiction.
Yeah.
Well, there isn't. It's like it's like you can't make up this stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
You cannot make up this stuff. In family law, I mediated a case. Again, we're talking low-income individuals. They don't have any money. And the issue that came up was who gets the snake. So the husband had bought a snake for the wife, a bowl, because she was a stripper.
Okay.
Right.
That's usually correlated, connected somehow.
She wanted the snake, right, for her job. And the husband said, well, no, I gave her the snake, and I like the snake as a pet. So of course it was actually one of the cases we couldn't mediate. We couldn't get a settlement for, and in fact, it's not even a case that you could take to court because children's law. It's not a child.
Yes.
Right? It's not under the Children's Law Reform Act.
You mean we don't have snake rights in this province here?
No. But you try to mediate. You try to. I had another case of mediation where the husband would find old cars, and he would blueprint them and fix them up, and he would sell them. And the wife was claiming that the husband had this inventory of expensive cars, and he said, no, they're all pieces of junk. I haven't even started working on them. They're valueless right now.
Okay.
And so anyways, and she was insistent. No. And, I said, okay, well, we're talking property division. I said, would you be prepared to offer her half of the cars?
Yeah.
And she turned around and said, I don't want that junk, right? So much for mediating a property division issue. Yeah, so it's like those types of cases. But I must admit, there are some cases that really sort of draw on and it's like those cases where you do have a child custody issue, right, or a child access issue, and and you really want to work with the families to get something going so that both parents can exercise their parental rights and can have that healthy relationship with their child moving forward.
Yeah, whatever the family unit looks like, right?
Exactly.
Is that the most frustrating part of your job when you were there? Is it frustrating that you're dealing with SPOA?
No, it's actually kind
rights?
of fun.
Okay.
You know what? Yeah, it's kind of fun because it's different, right?
Sure.
And it's like, okay, here we go. Right?
Yeah, of course. Here's another one. Here's a crazy one.
Oh, here we
for
go.
a story for the dinner table tonight at dinner.
Exactly.
But is it the kids? Is it the family? What's the most frustrating part of that job?
I think with any job, there are frustrations with it when things don't go your way, right? But the thing is, I think you just have to take the approach where either you power through it or you basically just. The thing I liked about mediation was we gave the opportunity for the parties to sort of sit down with us and help solution, right? So it's like, okay, so what would work for you if access is a problem right now? How can we make it work? Do you have any ideas? Let's talk about some ideas. Can we experiment? Can we try something? Come back a couple of months from now, and if it works, we can continue or expand it, right? So I think that there are things that we can help people because you don't, especially in family law cases, you don't, when it comes to custody and access, you don't end up, like at the end of the day, you were both parents. You were both parents to this child. Things have changed. You are no longer living together, right? How do we make this right, right? How do we create those circumstances where where you have two separate households now, where the child can benefit from both of you, right? And how can we start working towards that healthy relationship? And if it takes, but don't think at the end of the day it's going to be, custody for me. Like you can't go in with the perspective, I only want custody and custody is all I'm going to get, or I only want full-blown access and that's all I'm going to settle for. Sometimes we have to work towards those things, especially if there is no trust between the parties. So then it's, how do we develop trust? How do we set you up for some success here, right? So why don't we try some day access? And if day access is okay, why don't we move to overnight access? And if overnight access is okay, why don't we start talking about some expanded time during summer holidays?
Gotcha.
Or so let's start building some trust here, folks.
Yeah. Is there I'm assuming there's a lot of skills you learned being a mediator like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we actually, again, Legal Aid Ontario provided those opportunities. We were all trained on mediation, right? And how to facilitate settlements like that. Right?
Do you think that helped you a lot in your career and family life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially raising teenage boys.
Can imagine. Got to mediate there.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's like, okay, if you do this for me, what now?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I can imagine that's tough. As someone whose parents were divorced and had to do supervised visits and then slowly overnight and stuff like that. Mind you, I think what was nice was that both parents wanted to be parents and wanted to be involved. So
exactly.
Do you find a lot of it's the trust is the main issue at the table?
I do think it's trust, and I think there's always some hurt and some animosity too, if you're going through a separation, right? So I think it's overcoming some of those emotions and basically focusing where you have to focus, and that's on the child. Like I said, I get it. You're upset. I get it. You're hurt. I get it that that you may have been mistreated, but really at the end of the day, how was that person as a parent?
Interesting.
Well, really, that's the perspective. And okay, here's our focus. The focus is on the child.
Exactly.
Right?
Not on how they treated you, right?
No, this isn't about you anymore. This is about the child and how we can get the child to,
Yeah. No. Is there any crazy cases in that regard with boa constrictors and stuff with the kids, or was it just pretty?
No, I think they were all pretty, I think most of them involved, getting access, and not only that, but managing expectations, right?
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I think both parties, they come in with sort of preconceived ideas of where they want to be in that child's life, right? And sometimes those are unrealistic. So it's like, okay, they may be, it may be not appropriate right now, but how do we get it? How do we get the circumstances so that we can build ourselves and build that relationship, right?
Yeah. Is that the most satisfying part of the job?
Oh, it is.
Getting, okay.
It is. I found it. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get people out of court because really you don't really want to litigate these issues. If you are unable to resolve these issues on your own, if you're unable to, let's face it, these are sort of life skills. Moving forward, you're not going to have a lawyer who's going to deal with every time your access doesn't go well, or every time your pickup or drop off isn't the way you expect it to be, right? Like, we're not going to provide you with legal services to that extent, nor would you pay for a lawyer to do that. These are things that you're going to have to start coping with on your own. So, and I think judges and I think courts have an expectation that as parents, you're going to be able to solve some of these issues on your own ultimately, because you're not going to run to court every time something goes wrong on access or custody, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's something serious. If there's something serious, okay, if there's a material change in circumstances, absolutely. But for day to day, you know what? Get your act together. Figure it out. You're grown up, right?
It seems like a lot of parents would be acting like children at that point.
Well, and I think it's not so much acting like children, but they have certain expectations. And I think you've got to manage those expectations and say, right now, you know, that's not going to happen. Let's start building. Let's start building. You know, your situation so that you can actually start exercising some effective access, or you can start getting, or you can work towards that goal of joint custody if that's going to be. But you're not going to have a joint custody arrangement if the two of you can't talk.
You're almost like a parent.
Yeah.
You're parenting
parents
exactly. To parent
it's like,
their children.
Listen here.
Yeah.